Let's start the show with a time check. It's the middle of August right now, and if you're the parent of a student in class 11 or 12, that means that all you can think of right now for your kid is what next? It's that big college question. Where do you send your child? How do you send your child? And how do you end up making a decision among a plethora of choices?
Now, data suggests that more Indians than ever are navigating the global classroom. In 2024, an astounding 13 crore Indian students are studying in colleges abroad, with destinations like Canada, US, UK and Australia topping that list. In just 6 years, the number of students venturing overseas has nearly doubled. A growing ambition, growing curiosity of young India, and also ease of actually studying abroad. Lots of MOUs being signed between countries.
Now, if you're a parent who wants to send their child abroad and is wondering what are the nuts and bolts behind it, so the scholarship process, how you can go about funding it if you can't get a scholarship, how you can find the right fit for you, or if you're just an excited 16-year-old who wants to go abroad but can't figure out how and wants to do it on their own. Today's episode is a toolkit just for you.
So first, let's hear from someone who used scholarships to actually fully fund her right to Yale and then her Wharton MBA as well. Divya Balaji Kamarkar is not only your conventional front bencher, but she also has her dreams and has managed to fulfill it. Divya is with us this morning. Good morning, Divya. How's it going for you? And thanks so much for chatting up.
Divya, let's ask you, take us back to when you were in class 11, class 12. Did you have good grades? Is that the right way to describe you? Were you someone who had more of a full bouquet, other things you were bringing to the table? What kind of student were you?
So I was not a topper in school. I was not a head girl either. I was not one of those very fancy titles. And I decided to actually go abroad and study abroad because I realized in the typical CBSE education, I was not too keen on clustering myself into a biology stream or a computer science stream or something like that and deciding upfront and closing my options. I really wanted a liberal arts education where I could study everything. I could study humanities as well as math as well as sciences. So I decided to apply abroad. It was a very bold decision given that I actually needed nearly 100% financial aid to go through. But the process really worked well for me because till then I was an all-rounder. I was the kind of person who was definitely studious, so above 85% or above 90% in most of the exams, but I definitely wasn't like, there were at least 3 kids above me in class at all points of time who were more studious, right? Similarly, I also played a lot of sports. So I had played for Chennai in basketball. I was a long distance runner. And these were things that I was passionately pursuing on my own. I also was very passionate about wildlife conservation and social change. So I did a lot of work with RTI activists even before the RTI came out. I was also working in a crocodile reserve for reptiles in Tamil Nadu. I think these were some interesting experiences that really helped me with the admissions process. Finally got into Yale. And with a full, all of my cost of attendance taken care of. But I think this is the kind of personality that they are looking for. They're looking for interesting people, not just sort of toppers and things like that.
I think that's absolutely right. I think all universities now and more sort of school admissions here in India as well are looking for personalities and not just people who will mug up topics and just mug up the course altogether. But Divya, speaking to you reminds us of the time when we would all be put in front of students who had made it and asked questions. So if you were somebody guiding those watching you right now, what is your advice to them? Is guidance, counseling one way to go forward?
So I think the first thing is you have to go with someone who actually believes in you. So when with this completely unconventional profile, someone who had never thought about going abroad, who didn't even have her SAT scores in hand, was shopping counselors, the first thing I looked for was, do these people actually think I can do it, or are they the kind of people who are going to tell me to dilute my ambition, apply to sort of safety schools and less ambitious schools and things like that? Because that's something that I'm like, if I'm going all the way to the US, I better go to a very good school and study. So that was how I was thinking about it. So I, first of all, had to make sure that I was working with people who were not diluting my ambition, but helping me get there. Because honestly, when you're in 12th grade and you've applied to 10 places and you've really stretched and reached and you've applied to 10 places, when you get through one of those, the kind of personality, the kind of effect it has on your personality and your ability to really believe in yourself is a lot. So that was one thing. The second thing is I wanted to work with people because if you meet a counselor, sometimes they come with a long list of problems in your profile. People who are like, this is not there, that's not there, this is not there. And then there's another set of counselors who actually they get excited. They're like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I really like this about you. Let's focus on that. They're the kind of people who will actually get your story out, right? Because at the end of the day, most people have good grades. Most people have interesting things going on when they're applying to top universities. But the ability to really get that story out is what really makes the difference. So these were the two things that I was looking for. And I'm really glad I found it.
Divya, tell us, we keep telling our audiences you had a fully funded ride to Yale. Later, you even had a fully funded MBA journey at Wharton. But if we just focus on Yale itself, what does it actually mean to have a fully funded ride? What does that cover and what does it not cover?
Yeah, Yale was amazing. They even paid for my bed sheets and my books. But at the same time, there was always a cutoff, right? Like, this is how much money we can give for your living expenses. This is how much money we can give for books. My dining hall cost was covered, but it's not like you don't need extra money. So sometimes you have classes that require more infrastructure, more books. You have, for example, extracurricular activities that would require you to pay even $100, $200 deposit. You may have to buy winter clothes, which can range up to like $1,000 sometimes based on the whole set of things that you have to buy. And other things, right? Like, just because your dining hall money is covered doesn't mean you're not spending money every day on food, because there are certain specific hours in which these things operate. So if you want an extra coffee, or you want to, you've missed out on dining hall hours because you're studying or you were somewhere else, then you actually have to spend money for that. And additionally, people do fly home over winter break as well. In fact, people fly home more often during winter break than summer break. So you do need to sort of save up for that. The best way to do it is to get a student job. And that's what I did. So all 4 years of my time, I did work multiple or a single student job. Universities support this by providing student jobs which are easily manageable along with an academic workload, but it requires upfront planning and prioritization of time. It's not necessarily a walk in the park, but a lot of students do have student jobs. In fact, lots of American students have student jobs because most of them actually don't come in with a silver spoon in the mouth.
Right, so that was undergrad. Let's take it to the next leg then. You went to Wharton as well for an MBA that was fully funded. How different was that experience? Going by what we hear in universities abroad, there's a stark difference in the kind of crowd that gets in there and the culture.
So I think my MBA was also fully funded, but it's all merit-based. So it's not based on your financial need anymore in terms of whether you get funded for the MBA or not, just like I went to Wharton. I think that for me, what worked was I was working in a very interesting field. Like, I had started working in government after I graduated from Yale, did a lot of work on women's safety and security. And then I worked in consulting, but focusing on social impact. It just so happened that was the profile that universities are really interested in. So I did sort of qualify for some of the awards and endowment-based funding that they had at Wharton, and that's how I got through. But it's a very case-by-case basis. Many universities don't even declare upfront in the MBA process, especially, what their financial award status is looking like. They just say that as a part of your application, we'll also sort of consider you for other awards that we have. I also qualified for this Forte Fellowship, which is meant for women in leadership. So women who have demonstrated leadership in order to improve diversity in programs like the MBA, they do get some funding. But the MBA, because it leads to lucrative paths typically, most students do take up educational loans, and they've been able to pay that back comfortably, especially from a place like Wharton. I think that's a huge difference, because it's based on my work for the years after my graduation. It's based just on what I've done and my fit with the existing sort of things that are there within different universities.
Okay, Divya, thank you for
Nice.
laying out the
Nice.
topography for us in that way. So now to take you, our audiences, a step deeper into the story, we're joined by Arjun Sate. He's the founder of Ed Brand. It's an organization that has been counseling students in the college process all the way back since 1997. It's now one of Delhi's most prominent college counseling organizations. It gave Divya the advice that Divya received when she was making those decisions. Let's go over to Arjun to understand more. Arjun, just an opening question for you. A student comes to you and say they're worried about their financial backing, but they have this dream to study abroad that they've had for a while, and say they even come to you knowing what it is that they want to study. What's your first advice to them to make it a reality?
I think being ambitious is obviously a great thing, and Divya put it very nicely. But also just understanding the practicalities of different things that the family's preferences or conditions are. So that's really, I think, the buzzword would be practicality. Just have a focus on finding different aspects of studying abroad, and then identify what works for you.
Okay.
I see. I see. Arjun, then let's talk places. Let's do globe hopping and understand which are preferred sort of destinations of late. There are your usuals like USA, UK, Australia, Canada, etc. And then you recently have a lot of MOUs being signed with the French government, for example, for a lot of students to go there. That also eases out the process, sort of brings in more business and student exchange programs. But when a student is looking at countries, in India, we ask the question, should we take the college or should we take the subject? When you're looking at studying abroad, what is your first filter?
So I think very often students want to identify different things when they look at study abroad, and the whole globe is now opening up. Earlier there was obviously a trend to look at the United States, and still is the largest sort of student body cohort from India going to the US. Canada, Australia, the UK have always been, say, the second sort of rung of choices which students have. More than a particular country, my view is that it's really about the right fit college, and very often students don't spend enough time sizing up their preferences. So, but by and large, there are certain things which the education system or the college or the university system in certain countries provide. For instance, if you're looking at flexibility and, figuring out things, just like Divya mentioned in our earlier segment, it's important to go to a college which offers you that flexibility of course choices. If you're very certain of what you want to do, then of course there are many countries and many universities which only accept applications which are for a particular major. So I think it's, in short, I think it is a wide variety of choices, but if it's a particular course you want to study, then there are many options. But if you're still undecided, I feel liberal arts colleges or the liberal arts education system, be it now in India, we have choices in India too, but primarily I think the US has been a front runner for the liberal arts system and education. So that would be my first recommendation for a student like that.
Arjun, tell us, when we looked at Divya's example, even though she started by saying she's not, a class topper, it was very clear when she was talking about the achievements that she had, that she was very much someone who did have an impressive resume. I want to ask you if you have a student who is not able to bring, because every student is wholesome, right? And that's a belief we have. Every student has many things that they have going on in their life. But what's your key almost advice to helping students bring that out, their well-roundedness out on paper, so that any student can look like they're bringing a lot to the table?
I think very often students underestimate their life circumstances and things they've gone through. And very often we meet students who are living a cushy suburban life and they feel, oh, everything is fine and I don't really have a story to tell. I'm just doing everything what everyone else is doing. But, wait a minute, there are obviously very specific life experiences you have gone through, and they're not run of the mill for a college admissions officer sitting half the way across the world looking at your application. And very often I always tell students that connect it back to who you are, but also to the disposition you've kind of inherited from home or your culture or from, say, just being in India, which is such an exciting place. And many college admissions officers, when I have these conferences or I speak at various sessions abroad, come back to me and say, we are looking for students who are authentic. And that's where we want to feel a connect with the student. So just remove all the filters. Very often counselors or parents or the uncle or aunt who suddenly comes in the picture to give advice does surface and kind of hijacks the process for a student. So my job as a counselor or counselors in general first step would be to really spend time, have a connect with the student, and then start the advising. Help them take ownership of the plan that they want to build.
Yeah. It's like Arjun is saying, let's play the journalist job first. Let's get the story out of the student first, and we'll pack up the rest of the stuff later. But Arjun, I've always been very curious at the right time to start planning for foreign education. A lot of kids sort of think about it very early on, some sort of strike it like right towards the end. When do you say is a good time to think about or start planning if abroad is the way to go for you?
This is very interesting because just this morning I was speaking with someone in Singapore, and there's this shop which starts planning when the kids are 5 years old or something, which is not necessarily for college admissions, but the end goal is that the same organization also kind of leads up to helping students identify colleges when they get to high school. And that's stretching a bit too much, like managing every little move a student makes when they are not even sure of how to sort of tie their shoelaces. So it's something which I would definitely not want parents to go through or have kids go through because their parents feel that this is a service which is being sold. Ideally, there is a clock. I can sense it. Once you connect with a student in a family, there is a clock where the student is almost ready to sort of make these decisions. And very often you do have to nudge the student. So yes, very often we meet students who are in 9th grade, but ideally I feel it's just the 10th grade, around the time when they've just done with their, say, board exams, and then they could seek advice and get more serious.
Okay, Arjun, tell us, I do want to ask, you are one of or Ed Brand rather, is one of the more prominent organizations in Delhi. In Delhi at least, I do want to tell our audiences, the rates of a lot of these services can be quite stunning. Some would describe them as appalling. They can run up to multiple lakhs, and especially because in a lot of these processes, you have to take the SAT exam once, twice, sometimes even thrice, and college counselors, obviously it works differently, but they'll guide you through that whole process. So the bill can actually run up to be quite a large amount. I just want to ask you, Arjun, what do you suggest to students who can't afford it? What's your advice to them? Where can they still get good advice if they can't spring that kind of money?
So there are several sources. Of course, your school counselors, and if your school counseling office is not well sort of established, then of course, you depend on your peer group. So I went to a school in Calcutta, and there was this basically a peer group where students used to meet their seniors over summer, and seniors used to come back and brag about their experiences. And so you kind of learnt it from them. And that was the culture that, not every school student can sort of experience. But if you feel that, information online is not to be trusted, there are even very young influencers, and I know a few of them who've really done a good job, who address students in the language they understand, and we can always sort of listen to them, and there is credibility in what they say because they've also experienced not just the admissions process, but they're also in colleges. Then there are scholarship organizations which are specifically catering to undergrad sort of financial need or even merit-based awards, other than of course the colleges that also are generous, not just in financial aid terms, but also in sort of merit awards. So identifying those, and then there are many competitions which give funding. Now, many of those might seem that they might be good for, say, college students or grad students, but students who are in high school can also apply and sort of showcase their work and talent. So
I see.
There is a lot of information out there. It just needs to be sort of filtered. Like you have fake news, you also have all kinds of shops selling their scholarship or things like that. So you need to be really careful. and check the credibility of such opportunities that you go for.
Yes, and also not take every offer that comes your way on face value. We've learned that the hard way. Ravi, as we draw this to a close, I want to understand this. A lot of schools and colleges, in fact, schools in India and metros are switching to the IB board, right? Is it, and I've always sort of had this question, does going into an IB board or taking that call automatically means that you are on your way abroad? And is it any easier for students who are from IB boards to travel abroad and study abroad?
So there are two aspects of it. One is the IB curriculum. The way it's designed is it also is inculcating certain skills, which is say critical thinking, academic research, and the rigor of higher level courses, which is kind of tailor made to give you credits for college. So hence, it makes clear sense for students and families looking at studying abroad to avail of that opportunity. However, if you're in a city or a location where you're not, you cannot join an IB system school, or you're very happy with your current school and it's a national curriculum school, there is no need to worry or change things. You can still get credits by doing AP exams or, doing study abroad summer programs for credit again. So yeah, this would be, it's not really true that only students who go to an IB program can make it to a tier 1 college or a college of their choice. Or it's not even true that if they are the students who are in in an IB school can succeed and the others probably will have to do a lot of catch up. I think it's pretty much based on a student's individual sort of mindset, and if they want to know more about an education system and how to prepare for it, they can do that.
Arjun, thank you for joining us.
Good to know.
Yeah, thank you for joining us and really laying out the toolkit for us today on the show. That's Arjun Sate. He's the founder of Ed Brand. Let's move from him though now to bringing you the financial side of all of this. A little earlier when we were speaking to Divya, we talked about scholarships, but there's also always the question of taking out a loan. To break down the numbers, to break down the practicality of all of that, Ravi Saraogi is also with us. He's the co-founder of Samasthiti Advisors. He advises families on planning his children's corpuses when it comes to education and studying abroad. So let's just go over to him to understand first. Ravi, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Ravi, first question, common mistakes that you see people taking and making when they're taking education loans?
I think it's mostly on the amount of the loan, right? So first is you have to understand that the amount of loan that you're taking has to be commensurate with your financial resources. We see cases where, parents put their primary residence as a mortgage for their education loan, which I think is a problem and best avoided. We have seen cases where retirement assets, like for example, be it employees provident fund or public provident fund. So parents sometimes do a premature withdrawal from such instruments in order to create an education corpus, which can also have a bearing both from a tax part as well as certain other considerations. So I think it's the idea is not that you shouldn't build a large education corpus. I just think it's being cognizant of how much of education corpus can their financial resources handle.
You're saying so don't destroy your retirement loans and just be realistic about how much money you can actually pick up. That's an interesting one. But then who should be taking a loan? Should the kids be taking it in their names, or should parents, and are there also tax benefits attached to them?
So I think the students should take the loan. But in an education loan, the parents by default are the co-borrowers. So technically, the student is borrowing, but the parents are also co-borrowers, which works really well because that's an education loan. It has certain tax benefits attached to it as well. And depending on which college and university, you might get a very attractive rate of interest as well. If the parents want to procure a loan themselves, then it could be a personal loan, which could be at a very high interest rate. So that is not advisable. Second, the parents can take a loan against immovable properties, which is a decent idea as long as you're not taking it against your primary residence. So I think it makes sense for education loan where both the student and the parents are co-borrowers. And we can take a specific example. Let's say somebody has taken a 1 crore loan. Let's say the loan tenure is 10 years, and that's typically the tenure for an education loan. The rate of interest is, let's say, 10%. So the EMI will come to about 1.3 lakhs per month, right? So for a student who is able to secure an international placement, this is a very serviceable EMI, right? Because they may be earning in a stronger currency like US dollar or euro, and repaying the loan in a weaker currency like the Indian rupee.
Yeah.
When it comes to the technicality around actually taking a loan, what should one pick? Should you go for the higher EMI but for a smaller duration, or should you instead go for a lower EMI but just for a longer duration?
So from a student point of view, always negotiate for the longest loan tenure. And that is because you can always prepay a loan earlier. And as per Reserve Bank of India guidelines, there is no prepayment penalty. So no bank can put a prepayment penalty on you because you prepaid earlier. So you can always, in your own math, target an early repayment, but always negotiate with the bank for the longest tenure. In fact, we took an example of a 10-year education loan, but you can actually push that tenure to as high as 15 years if you negotiate well. So we prefer a longer, tenure, which will make the EMI very manageable. And that's essentially just contingency planning. So let's say your placement gets delayed because of geopolitical reasons, or because of recession, or because of economic growth falling, right? You always have a fallback option. About repaying your loan in an easier, glide path.
Right, right. Also, help us understand this, Ravi. Does it make a difference what course you're doing for availability of loans? For example, would so-called safer professions like MBAs or more, conventional courses be easier to get a loan versus, say, fashion and the rest of it?
Yeah, so it's a lot easier, like you mentioned, Sonal, for courses which are market aligned and which the banks perceive to have a very high return on investment from an education expenditure point of view. So you're talking about MBA or courses in finance, or engineering, STEM, for example. Those are courses, for which procuring a loan becomes easier. For liberal arts and fine arts, it could be a little more challenging. But I think here it is important to note that liberal arts education typically costs lower than STEM education or even courses in MBA or finance. So while you may have a little more difficulty in procuring that loan, you may not have to go for a very large loan, and hence it becomes a lot more manageable. I think it is also important to understand that there may have been a time where education loan was only feasible for a commercially inclined course, but I don't think that holds true nowadays. Just to give an example, development policy is a very big field, and it's become even bigger now. And it's grown its tentacles across different sectors. Like, for example, the field of finance has a field called impact investments, which marries financial returns and social returns. So someone who is actually trained in, let's say development or social policy can actually even now explore a career, in finance. So I think we're living in a world which is very multidisciplinary, and there is an increasing recognition, of different courses. Like, for example, sociology, economics is always, was well accepted, but even fields like we are seeing, students pursue anthropology internationally and procuring a loan for that.